Hello, my name is Jewel Crossan, and in this video I will be analyzing how institutional and social generalizations that have been made about the identity of Arab Americans has proved to be detrimental to the Arab American community and has resulted in a loss of identity. To support my thesis, I will be focusing on Nadine Naber's introduction of Arab Americans and U.S. racial formations, Hayyan Charara's Something Sinister, and Alicia Arion's Towelhead. I will be arguing that institutional and social generalizations grouping Arab Americans into, as Nadine Naber describes, Arab, Middle Eastern, and/or Muslim, allows for Arab American identity to erode in the wake of false presumptions of danger, otherness, and incivility that are fabricated from anti-Arab and racist propaganda. Naber, within her introduction of Arab Americans and U.S. racial formations, explains that the representations of terrorism and Islamic fundamentalism that are tied to Arab Americans today have basically replaced other representations of Arab Americans that have been made in the past, such as rich Arab oil sheiks and belly dancing harem girls. This is significant because it illustrates that Arab American identity has been misconstrued throughout the course of United States history. According to Naber, these generalizations have evolved over time. In the 1970s, Arab Americans were associated with rich oil sheiks, harems, and belly dancers. This is a more exotic and eroticized identification that was being generalized about Arab Americans during this period. And then we see towards the 1980s, this shifts into a more negative view about Arab Americans. For Naber explains that they were identified as rats malevolently entering a house or caught in a trap, or as fleas infesting a region and being exterminated. And we see that this gets even worse towards the 1990s when Arab Americans are being portrayed as terrorists in popular films. By 2001, generalizations about Arab Americans being terrorists are already being made, and after the events of September 11, 2001, this association just becomes a little bit more solidified, especially with the political climate. And with a situation like 9/11, emotions are incredibly high. Citizens are scared for their lives, and there's just this uncertainty in the air. And this allows for generalizations about Arab Americans to be made like this. In this case, a generalization that all Arab Americans, all Muslims, all individuals from the Swana region are considered to be terrorists and are not to be trusted. And this led to legislation being passed that strips Arab Americans of their rights, and so on and so forth. At this point, threats are being made, violence is being inflicted upon Arab Americans because of hasty generalizations that do not define an entire community. And this leaves us with the question of what's going on in the minds of Arab Americans during this period? How are they reacting? Is there any way for the identity to recover? And if so, how is this to be done? It is evident that Arab American writers during this period are reclaiming their identities and pointing out the fallacies in making hasty generalizations like this. Naber states a wide range of identities have been associated with terrorism and Islamic fundamentalism, including Arab Christians, Iranian Jews, Latinos or Latinas, and Filipinos or Filipinas, among others. illustrating that dominant U.S. discourses on Islam and Muslims are not only malleable and fluid, but are arbitrary, fictional, and imaginary at best. It is evident that Arab American identities have eroded in the wake of all of these generalizations about a community that have been made. And it's problematic too because society in the United States is accepting these generalizations that are being made. So it is up to individuals like Niebuhr, Cherara, and Arion to take back their identities through writing and basically decode and debunk all of these generalizations that have been made. Hayan Cherara, within Something Sinister, grapples with these generalizations that are being made about his identity and about his community's identity. And in a poem titled Being Muslim, he states, "Oh, you loved being Muslim then, even when you drank whiskey, even when you knocked down my mother again and again. He prayed, 5 times a day, and he was mean." This poem illustrates that you cannot associate somebody's religion or belief system or even their racial classification with an action. And this translates to the events of 9/11 as well, in terms of you cannot blame an entire community for the actions of an individual. Our class actually had the opportunity to interview Charara and ask him a few questions about this piece. And he actually explained that this piece was about his father and that his father dealt with mental illness. And this just further emphasizes the point that his father wasn't abusive and mean because of his religion or ethnic background. In addition to debunking these fallacies and generalizations about Arab American identity that are made, Cherara, within a poem titled You, explains really what it's like to have your identity as an Arab American eroded. He states, "Once you begin to see you differently as separate from you, wholly other from you, then you can become like us." In this poem, Cherara explains this bifurcated sense of identity that he has as an Arab American. On one hand, he is seen by Americans as a questionable and dangerous individual who could possibly be a terrorist and a danger to society. And on the other hand, he knows and understands his true identity as an Arab American, but because of these generalizations, he has to see himself through two lenses. In addition to Cherara's reclaiming of identity through the medium of literature, Alicia Arion, within her novel Towelhead, explains this phenomenon through the lens of a 13-year-old girl, Jasira's eyes. And for she states, "We watched the news for the rest of the night. Daddy was getting madder and madder about the Scuds. Saddam kept shooting them at the Israelis, and that made the Palestinians happy, and they kept showing the happy Palestinians on TV. This is not the Arab perspective," Daddy yelled. Every day he hoped the Americans would kill Saddam. This point in the novel is significant because it illustrates that Mr. Vioso, a neighbor to Jasira and her father, who is a reservist, is wrong about his misconceptions about Jasira's father, for he believes, because of hasty generalizations that have been made about Arab Americans, that Jasira's father, who is from Lebanon, must be a supporter of Saddam Hussein. And this goes hand in hand with Charara's poem You, where he explains this bifurcated sense of understanding himself. In this case, Jasira's father knows who he is and who he identifies as an Arab American. And in this case, he hates Saddam Hussein, and his sentiments are with the general consensus of Americans. But regardless of what he knows about himself or believes, individuals like Mr. Vioso are going to make these generalizations and continue to erode his true identity as an individual. At one point in the novel, Jasira has the opportunity to counter generalizations that Mr. Vuoso makes towards her father. Because her father is an Arab man, Mr. Vuoso makes the false generalization that her father, because he is Arab, must love Saddam Hussein. And Jasira explains, if you say he does, you're making an assumption about him based on his nationality. That's racist, like when you used to call us towelheads. Through standing up to Mr. Vuoso, Jasira is able to illustrate that by resisting these generalizations and fighting against them, she is able to reclaim her identity as an Arab American individual who is separate from these generalizations that are made about her identity. Nadine Naber, Hayan Charara, and Alicia Arian are all Arab American writers who are dealing with the erosion of Arab American identity in the United States of America. This erosion has created a bifurcated sense of identity in Arab Americans, and individuals like Naber, Charara, and Arian have to reclaim their identity through resistance.